Cuts back from Harfield. 1-0 Burnley. Scott Harfield. He's been threatening that recently. And all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end. Oh, what a goal! What a goal from Robbie Blake! Burnley's first goal in the Premier League is something very, very special.
Wade Elliott has that change of pace and he's got away from Montgomery. It's the path of McCann and the follow-up finds the net. What a strike from Wade Elliott! A bolt from the claret and blue.
Oh goodness me! What a goal from Patterson! If that is to be the one that takes them to Wembley, you cannot argue with that. Pure quality.
Here goes Mike Conroy. Still time for a winner, maybe. John Francis! They came to York in their thousands. They're going home as champions.
I mean, if there's any justice in the world, Burnley would surely score from this corner. Swung right in there. Ball in there. Yeah! Michael Kennan! Oh, that's justice! That is justice at the Amex Stadium. Burnley are level and deserve to be.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the second episode of Turfcast, well the second show I should say that we're doing here on Turfcast for today, and it's with Andy Jones, as you can see, who's on your screen now, the athletic journalist. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Just very warm. It's very hot today,
Yes.
isn't it? And I can see you're in a hoodie, so you must have a very good air-conditioned house.
Yeah, well, it's not too bad at the moment. But I've just come back from 2 weeks in Lanzarote, so this is sort of
this is great for you, is it? Yeah, fair enough. I've reacclimatized recently after spending a week away in Greece, so this is very, very hot. But what better way to spend the hottest day of the year so far than sat indoors talking to you? And of course, we're going to be doing a transfer chat because there's a lot of stuff going on, incomings, outgoings. Now, this chat was originally scheduled for 2 o'clock, but obviously this isn't live, but we've had to push it back to 2:30. And that's because you and one of your colleagues at The Athletic has broken a story about Burnley being interested in Daniel Ballard, I think you're pronouncing it, or Ballard, a young Arsenal defender who was on loan at Millwall last season. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's come from James McNicholas, who's the Arsenal correspondent, or one of our Arsenal correspondents, and it's very much looking likely. I think it's an advanced stage. I think talks are advanced, and I think sort of medicals, organised. So I think it looks like this is probably going to be Burnley's first signing through the door. I think Vincent Kompany played a big part in sort of convincing him, and I think that sort of is an indication of the pull and the appeal that Burnley having this type of manager with the name in the game, especially when you're trying to attract a young centre back. That's the possibility that can come in, and I mean he's had a couple of loan spells. I think at Blackpool and Millwall last season was Millwall, and I think he's had plenty of really good reviews from both those clubs. So. And he, clearly knows the league from last season, so he's got experience in that aspect as well. And importantly, it's an area that Burnley needed to, recruit in. Given they'd lost James Tarkowski and Ben Mee, you would expect them to play centre back. I think he can do a little bit of midfield as well. So, be interesting to see if that plays a part in how he's used.
Yeah, and I've not had a chance to read the article yet because, of course, you sent it, but then we've come on here straight away. But someone is commenting on the tweet that I've put out, obviously quote tweeting yours, sort of like saying that Arsenal are putting something in the deal so they can buy him back straight away. Is that true?
Yeah, so I think I'll just read it because it's my colleague who. So I think there's the Arsenal intending to insert a clause into the deal which would grant them the opportunity to match any future bids. So I don't think that's necessarily a straight buyback. Okay. I think it's a case of if by the sounds of what my colleague is certainly his understanding is that it'll be something where if a club bids 10 million for him in January, then Arsenal and Burnley accept that. I guess Arsenal would have the ability to match that bid and give the player the option of where he wanted to go. But yeah, I think that's the situation with that.
Yeah, so he seems quite highly rated at Arsenal. Do you know much about him for those players, those fans, sorry, that don't know too much about him? Because I'll be honest, I've not seen him play. I'll be brutally honest, I've not seen him play too much.
Yeah, so he's he's an Northern Ireland international, so he comes with that pedigree. I think he's got 15 caps, and it's sort of a name that's just as you say, he's come out of the blue a little bit. Really, it's only sort of over the last hour or so we've sort of got these indications. So I've not been able to do much research myself. But yeah, I think he played 33 times for Millwall. I think there's a couple of interviews he's done with The Athletic on our site, which I'll be reading. So, if any Burnley fans who subscribe to The Athletic will be able to find them as well. So they'll probably give a bit of more of an insight. But he's certainly, a player that, is highly rated. I think there was more than just Burnley interested. I think there was a couple of clubs interested in him. And I think he's played 30 times for Blackpool, 33 for Millwall. So he's shown that he's a first team. He knows what the first team environment's about. It's not a case of plucking someone out of an academy who's done really well in the under-23s, but is unproven at first team level. It's clear he knows, and he will have the experience of the 2 years out on loan.
Yeah, fair enough. You said it looks like this will be the first signing. Can we expect a lot of movement in the next few days, an announcement maybe end of next week, something like that?
It's difficult. I think it's difficult to know because it's one of those. The transfer window is just so mad that something that could look unlikely can suddenly become, bang on, happening straight away. It's just the nature of the beast, really. The expectation generally is Burnley want to recruit a number of players. I think it was suggested to me potentially double figures. Which would obviously suggest there's a lot of work that needs to be done, in the next few weeks. But, ideally you get as many of them in during pre-season, but you do have, when the season starts, you've still got another month before the window shuts to keep adding to the squad. I don't think progress it's been slower than hoped. And I think that's for a number of reasons. But yeah, no, the sense is they want to do a lot, and they need to, because you look at sort of the players back in training, and I know there's a few still on international. Well, we're on international duty, so now on holiday, but there's not many first team players when you're sort of thinking about the bigger picture squad. And I think Burnley realised last season that they needed a bigger squad than they were carrying, and that was sort of 2 players for every position at that point. And with the Championship, with how intense, the fixtures came out and how intense that schedule is, especially with that World Cup. You're going to need, a significant squad. And I think it's a case of Burnley not just wanting to replace the players who've gone, but also add as well to the squad.
Yeah, you mentioned players that have gone or are going there, so that's a perfect chance to go on to out. We'll do outgoings first. After, obviously, we've done Ballard because you've literally just broken it. So we'll do outgoings first, then we'll go into incomings. Obviously, the immediate one looks like Nick Pope could be announced at Newcastle today or tomorrow. He's down at St James's Park, or should I say up at St James's Park now, having his medical. There's a bit of confusion on the fee on this one, though. That's what I want to ask you about, because it's pretty much signed, sealed, delivered. He's going to Newcastle. He'll be a Newcastle player soon. But some places reporting 10 million. Namely, the Telegraph, is it Luke Edwards, and Sky Sports reporting 10 million, but Lancs Live and Alex James and some other local people are reporting 15 plus add-ons. What's your understanding on the fee?
It's a difficult one to actually know exactly what it's going to be. It's been rather secretive, and it was another move that sort of has snowballed quite quickly by the signs of it, because my understanding of the situation yesterday morning, I think that's when it happened, didn't it? Yeah. Was that the clubs were still a little bit apart in terms of what each valued the player. So something clearly came together. It was Tuesday, wasn't it, when it all sort of happened? These all days all just rolling into one at this point for me. Nobody, I don't think it's one of those situations where I don't think anyone's going to know the exact amount, because, as you say, it's the various reports, and therefore it's it's difficult to know exactly. But you would hope that Burnley have secured a deal which suits them. It was always going to be difficult for them in conversations I had leading into the summer in regards to Pope. If Burnley were to go down, there was a feeling that 10 million was going to be around the right mark, or that's what clubs were sort of valuing him at. I know there was a few reports that Burnley valued him higher, and as they should, really, given his importance. And I think if Burnley stay up, I don't think there's probably this, this rumour. I would imagine Pope would have probably stayed and probably signed a new contract, because initial discussions sort of around March time had gone well, and club and players seemed to be on the same page. So I think if Burnley was still able to offer that Premier League football, he would have probably put pen to paper and been a part of the new era. But yeah, so it's difficult to know exactly what the fee is going to be. I'm sure it'll be, there'll be add-ons to it. But you would like to think that Burnley, if it's the best deal for Burnley, and they can use that money moving forwards in this window, and to try and boost their own squad.
Yeah, well, we both know it'll be undisclosed. The official amount will be undisclosed. It always is when it comes to Burnley. So it's one of them, isn't it? You just got to go off what reports, I guess, that you trust the most. With Nick, though, you guess, like you say, he probably would have been part of the project if we'd have stayed up. But it's one of them, isn't it? He falls in the talky category. You're obviously gutted to see him go, but you wish him all the best, sort of thing, because he deserves to be playing Premier League football.
Exactly. I think Burnley were resigned to the fact that they were going to lose him, and they didn't want to stand in his way. I think, Pope needs to be playing Premier League football to make sure he's in that World Cup squad. And I know it's not the only reason, you want to be playing Premier League football, but that World Cup is huge, given he missed the European Championships because of, the knee surgery that he needed. So I think it probably heightens that desire to make sure he's in this squad this time, because of the unfortunate circumstances. And with Dean Henderson looking like, I'm not sure if it's definitely done yet, but looks like he's going to be moving on loan to Nottingham Forest. So if he's playing regular football, Nick Pope's playing football in the Championship, given the suggestion that Gareth Southgate's not quite sure on his kicking, etc., etc., he would have put himself in a little bit of a disadvantage, and would probably have had to have played out of his skin, which he may have, to give himself a chance of being in the squad. Yeah. Where if he's in the Premier League, I would expect them to beat Martin Dubravka out and be Newcastle's number one first day of the season. I think that there's going to be a battle between those two, but I think it gives them an opportunity to come in and do that. And I think Burnley were resigned to that and knew they were going to lose them, because I think it's fair to say the respect that some players deserve to be playing at a higher level, and they wouldn't want to keep them and keep them unhappy, basically, because it's just no good for anyone at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on to Weghorst. He's another one that looks to be on his way out. A lot of rumours surrounding Besiktas, but apparently now the latest I saw was that Besiktas, he's agreed terms with him, but he's holding out to see if another Premier League club, which is unlikely in my opinion, will come in for him, or a Bundesliga club will come in for him. What's the latest that you know about on that?
Yeah, so the conversation I had sort of earlier in this week, and as I say, it could have moved on by this point because of the nature of the window, was that sort of there been a number of inquiries just to sort of see, talk about his availability, wages, etc., just to, I think, for clubs to get a bit of an indication of the situation and what they might have to pay. But at that point, there'd been no sort of official offers made, I think. But we understand that Besiktas are very much interested in him. So it may be a case of Weghorst waiting it out a little bit and sort of seeing where the best opportunity is for him, because he's in a similar situation to Pope, and that he needs to be playing games, he needs to be scoring goals and performing to make sure he makes it into the Dutch World Cup squad. There wasn't Burnley and him. There is a verbal agreement that he would, if they didn't stay up, he would be allowed to leave. But one thing Burnley haven't done, they haven't shut the door on a potential loan and him coming back next season and then sort of reassessing the situation. For example, if they come back up to the Premier League, could suddenly he come back after a year away, hopefully playing well, scoring goals, etc. And then could he be valuable for Burnley in the Premier League? So I think it might not necessarily be, if a permanent deal is available and the money's right and it makes sense for all parties, then you'd expect that to happen. But I think it seems to be more like a loan, and therefore I think Burnley haven't shut the door on potentially him, going out but then coming back in and reassessing the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because obviously I'm speaking from a fan. You'll obviously have a reporter's hat on and probably look at it differently. But the way he's conducted himself since we've gone down, I'm not the biggest fan of. I don't see how he goes away now while we slog it out in the Championship, playing Tuesday at Millwall, for example, then, Saturday, somewhere else away at Norwich, we're going to be on a slog. Our players and the fans are going to be on a right slog in the Championship. And he's sunning it up in Turkey, then he just waltzes back in if we get promoted. I don't see how he comes back in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, it is a tough situation. I think it's weird because those quotes came out and I understood why there was frustration and a bit of anger towards him. But he sort of has just been honest. He's been asked about his future and he sort of said, it's one of those, should he have said it publicly? Probably not. But, he's been honest and that agreement is in place. So, for himself, he's, the more people who know he's available, the better, I guess. But yeah, it does make it a bit tricky for him if he does, if he's not, as you say, lived through this season, if it does end in promotion, and he's not been through that, and he's not been part of Kompany's squad, the culture he builds in this first season. So yeah, I mean, it might be a case of where he comes back, and if he has a good season, it might just improve his value, which will help Burnley. But yeah, it's a situation that's ongoing. You expect them to leave, and then what happens after that is a bit of a wait and see, depending on the nature of the deal, whether it's a loan or a permanent.
Yep, fair enough. We've got quite a few other players that are in demand, or you think would be in demand. Maxwell Cornet, that one's quite quiet. I've not heard much on him, but I would have expected him to be in demand. Is there anything on that you know?
Yeah, so again, I mean, there was a lot of interest in him initially, and I think in a way it might, and this is just sort of a bit of my opinion, it might be the fact that he's got a set release clause, which is why things haven't sped up, because clubs know exactly what they need to pay for him to get him. He's currently on holiday at the moment because he didn't play for the Ivory Coast, but he joined up and trained with them. But I think he was carrying a little bit of a knock, so they didn't risk him in the game. So that's why he's not back in training yet. But I think unless anything changes, he will turn back up to Barnfield when he's scheduled to, which I think is a couple of weeks' time, or when I think it might be the 1st of July, possibly, whenever all the internationals come back. And he'll just get his head down and work hard. That's the understanding I've got. And then I think it's a case of Burnley waiting to see, who plays the hand, really. Because I would be very surprised if there isn't a club who thinks, given what he showed in glimpses, rather than especially second half of the season when he struggled a little bit more. There's clearly quality there, and if you can get him in a settled team, in a settled system, you can get him injury free. He's got so much to offer. So you would think he'd be appealing to a number of Premier League clubs, as probably the interest has shown. But yeah, doesn't seem to be much movement on that. But it's probably one of the easier deals to move quickly, because as soon as a club triggers that release clause, then things will turn quickly with it.
What is the release clause? Do you know what it is?
The release clause is it was a relegation release clause. So I think it was my colleague David Ornstein who broke the story. £17.5 million, you believe it to be, which I think is it's sensible. I think it's not overpriced, and it's not pricing clubs out of it. So but it also
gives us a profit.
Exactly, it nets Burnley a profit, which is important. So that's why if it was like 40 million, then you'd probably go, well, don't think anyone's going to be hitting that. So that might have made it a little bit more complicated. But because it's a fee that's that people are going to you would expect people to hit, because it probably represents a fair valuation of them. It might just be a case of clubs doing, because that's their doing other business that they need to, or maybe if they've got other priorities, and then they come back to that one as the window progresses.
Yeah, I don't see how like a lower league Premier League side doesn't take that risk, because it's not that much of a risk, is it? 17.5 million. We've seen that it can be decent last season. Moving on, Dwight McNeil as well. I've seen a couple of links this morning to Everton, but I don't know. Like, he's had a poor 18 months. I'd be surprised if a club like Everton did come in for him. I think Dwight's one of them that we may keep hold of just because he's had a poor 18 months, but I think he'll do well in the Championship.
Yeah, and I almost feel like Dwight might need a year to be one of the best players in the Championship. And I feel like because he's got the ability to do that, and I know he's had a difficult 18 months to 2 years really, and he's not progressed in the way anybody wanted to. You know, he's been, you know, frustrated. He's wanted to improve, and especially those goal contributions. And while he's improved aspects of his game, you know, you still come back to those goals and assists. And as a creative player, that's what he needs to be. Those numbers need to be much better. And I almost feel like, you know, does he just need? I mean, there'll be a reset anyway. Company, you know, his system, if he brings over what he did at Anderlecht, encourages his two wide players to be really narrow, which is what Dwight likes to do: get on the ball, be the creative, technical players. I think that role would really suit him, either on the left side or coming in on the right on a sort of stronger foot. So I feel like he could do him really, really good to have a year where he's, you know, one of the best players on the pitch every week, and that you would imagine Burnley will dominate possession more in games and be one. You would like to think they're going to be one of the better teams in the Championship, and therefore that should, you know, only help him. But I think there's always interest in him. You know, because people know the potential, and it might be a case of he just needs a bit of a change of environment, and that might spark something. You know, he still loves it at Burnley, and he loves the dressing room, and etc. etc. But I think that at the moment he's not at the top of anyone's list in terms of clubs that are interested. So it might be a situation again that develops, you know, a little bit later in the window if clubs have sorted their priorities or they miss out on a few of the targets, and then Dwight might become, you know, their top of that list. I think the other thing is valuation, because I think I would expect Burnley to value him higher than what, you know, opposition clubs or, you know, other clubs would. Because they know his talent, the contract he's on is in Burnley's favour at the moment in terms of length, I think. So yeah, it's a difficult one, and it'll probably be one that sort of begins to develop. But at the moment, it's sort of, you know, he's just back into pre-season and concentrating on himself and concentrating, you know, because the important thing is him starting the season well, because I think if he does that, the confidence will build and build and build in him, and that's what he's been missing, really. I think just that spark, just to get him going. He's shown moments, but then not been able to build on them as much as he would have liked to. But we saw it in a couple of those first games under Mike Jackson. You know, that was like back to his best, and we saw the ability, and we saw everything he can offer. And I think that Company, you would imagine, will want to harness that and try and, you know, keep building on that and keep improving him.
Yeah, fair enough. Another one who will do very well at this level and probably deserves to be at a higher level. It's gone a bit quiet on him recently. It's Nathan Collins. There was a lot of noise about last week. The Wolves, Southampton, a few people interested. But it's gone a little bit quiet now. So what's the latest on him?
Yeah, so my understanding is Burnley are very much determined to keep hold of him. And that sort of only an astronomical figure would bring them to the table. Which I think makes loads of sense. I mean, again, the contract situation's in Burnley's favour, so they're not under pressure to sell him. I think there's a feeling that with potential other outgoings that they'll have, you know, they'll bring money in, and therefore, you know, there's a feeling money's to spend, they're there to spend anyway. So that will, the money coming in from other players will therefore, you know, enhance that transfer kitty a little bit. So I don't like. There's no need to sell him, and therefore, you know, why would you when you've got I think one of the best young centre backs in English football at the moment on your books, and you know, it's an opportunity for him to step up and become the leader of that defence. And his performance against Tottenham last season away from home, when he basically did that at the heart of the back three or the back five, I thought he showed all the qualities of being a leader. You know, he just seems to keep getting better and better. And I think there is interest. I think that there's been inquiries just to see, I think, what the situation is and, you know, what it might take to prize him away, because his performances in the Premier League last season for a rookie, effectively, you know, in his first year, coming in a lot of the time, you know, out of the cold when Tarky or Benme missed the game, it was so impressive. And it was just, I was gutted for him, because he threw in the inexperienced, you know, nightmare game on the final day of the season.
Yeah.
And, with the penalty, and he lost his head a little bit just before that when he tried to dribble out from his own box. You could see at the end, he was gutted, and I think it took a few days for him to pick himself up and sort of dust himself off, because he'd been a key part of that sort of of putting Burnley in the position to stay up, and then I don't think he will ever be able to explain why he threw his arm up, when that ball was coming across the box. But yeah, but coming back to his situation now, I think he's on holiday now. He's enjoying enjoying some time off, and well-earned time off after that goal he scored. I think it's I think that's the situation. Burnley want to keep hold of him, and they will do everything they can to, unless an offer a significant price comes in, and therefore you'd be silly to turn it down, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to potential incomings then, the bit that probably most people are watching for. Firstly, Wallace, obviously been announced today that he's gone to West Brom. Obviously, this is Jed Wallace we're talking about. There was reports of us being interested in him. Were them reports true? I don't think any bid was made, was there?
Well, he was a free agent, so I think there was. Okay. It wouldn't be a case of putting a bid in, but you would offer a contract. I think there was interest from Burnley's side. I'm not entirely sure how strong it was, but I think there were certainly discussions about, I think, to see what terms he wanted, and it suggests the fact that he's gone to West Brom that they've offered him the best terms, and sort of that's the club he feels is best to go to. But yeah, my understanding is that Burnley are looking in the free agent market, and Jed Wallace was one player. I mean, you'd be silly not to, I think, given his the numbers he's put out and the experience he's got. For no transfer fee, I think it would have made sense. But you never know with the terms of these types of deals, and whether Burnley just thought or whether West Brom just offered more than what Burnley did, and that's why he went there, or there's various reasons it could be. But yeah, Burnley were interested in him, so it's a bit of a disappointment that he's gone to what you would expect to be probably a promotion rival.
Yeah, fair enough. I saw reports that they offered him 40,000. I'm not sure how true that is, but I think that's quite a lot for the Championship, isn't it? So I would understand why Burnley have pulled the plug on that one if he was being offered 40,000. But moving on to players that we may still get, because obviously they haven't gone anywhere else yet. The one that I have seen, the only one that I've seen so far that we've actually put a bid in for is Scott Twine, obviously young MK Dons forward. We reportedly put a £4 million bid in, but West Brom, MK Dons said that's not currently met their valuation yet. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so it's been a bit tricky, to be honest, to sort of. I've been been trying to do a lot of digging on the situation and not really got anywhere. But that seems to be the latest of the situation. The report was came out that Burnley had reportedly bid for him, and then the MK Dons manager has spoke, I think, the day after that came out. No bids met the valuation. So I think that's. I don't think the situation sort of moved on from that point. I think it is sort of. It's. I'm still trying to dig to try and find out what the exact latest is, which is proving a little bit difficult. But yeah, I mean, he's a player who looks like the perfect type of signing. Given his sort of the numbers he put out last season, I think he was League One Player of the Season. He looks like that type of player that if it is that £4 or £5 million mark, that you could take a gamble on, and you would probably you would back him to succeed, because it looks like he's ready to take that next step up. And he's those types of numbers that he produced and the creativity that he'd offer, and another attacking option would be really exciting, I think, to see how company would use him. So he's a signing that you sort of you hope that Burnley are able to do, because you would expect good things from him.
Yeah, I agree with that. You expect good things from him now, and then he's just only going to get better, and then we'll have a big resale value on him potentially in 3-4 years if he does get better and better. We've spoken already about Daniel Ballard, from coming from Arsenal, but obviously we've also been linked with Harewood Bellis at Man City. Does the Ballard agreement sort of like compromise Harewood Bellis, or are we expecting them to both come in?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one because I'm sure you're probably going to mention Luke McNally as well. But it's a difficult one to know because, Burnley technically have only got, as we speak, have only got 2 centre-backs and they need more than that.
And in my opinion, one of them's not good enough.
Exactly. Well, yours not mine, but yeah. There's a question mark and you want to get, you want to make sure you've got a strong, as we alluded to earlier, you want to make sure your squad is strong, and you've got a number of options, that you can call upon if injuries occur, etc., suspensions, whatever. So I think there's definitely interest in Harwood Bellis. Company worked with him at Anderlecht last season and is clearly an admirer of him. And I think there's definite interest. I don't know how sort of close it is to sort of being done or close to being done or anything like that. But I think he's one of a few sort of Manchester City players that Burnley are looking at in regards to being potential loan options. Which makes sense. I mean, company's got the contacts there, and it's a good chance for Manchester City, from Manchester City's perspective, to get some of these younger players playing in what you would expect to be the high end Championship, football, and that can only improve and help their development. But yeah, so it's difficult to say at the moment, but you would suspect, given that the fact that Burnley have only got 2 centre backs, you would think they'd be looking to add more than one. And I think from a couple of conversations, I think there might be a sort of a priority on the permanent deals at the moment, and then the loans might come a little bit later. But as I say, that could all change if suddenly interest steps up or suddenly a deal becomes much easier to do. So, but yeah, Taylor Harwood Bellis, I think he's of interest, and maybe another centre back coming through the door.
Yeah, it makes sense to get him. Like you say, we've only got Kevin Long and obviously Collins on the books at the minute, who are senior centre backs. So it would make sense to bring both of the lads in. And of course, you've already mentioned McNally at Oxford as well. So we'll go on to that one now. What's the situation on that one? Because we've been linked strongly with him, but mainly reports down in Oxford that I've seen, that they're the ones that I seem to see more. So what's the latest on that one?
Yeah, so in my piece that I put out earlier this week, my understanding is that there's been 2 bids made and they've been rejected, and sort of it's got to the point now where interest, Burnley are sort of looking elsewhere, because I think that they've got a number of options for players in a number of positions, and therefore they may still come back in for McNally if something changes and the situation moves on or whatever, but and whether Daniel Ballard was an alternative to McNally or vice versa, we're not quite sure. But my understanding was, after those 2 bids had been rejected, Burnley was starting to look at other options that they could potentially bring in, whether that was due to it being a lower fee or various reasons. But yeah, so that's where that situation is at the moment. I don't think it's moved on from that point. And it would be interesting to see whether Daniel Ballard turns out to be one of the alternatives to McNally, or, as we say, they were looking to add more than just the 2 centre halves. Because you've got to remember as well, Kevin Long I think he's out of contract this summer, so he's got 1 year left. Okay. So, you're looking towards, further afield and looking further ahead to, well, maybe if you bring one in and it doesn't necessarily play much this season, it's a year under his belt, a year working with Vincent Kompany, which no centre half would probably say no to, I don't think, especially young ones in the English league, in the Football League. So it might be that situation, but at the moment, 2 bids rejected, and Burnley are exploring other options.
Yeah, just going back to the City youngsters. Obviously, you mentioned that company will have a lot of contacts there for obvious reasons. Are there any other ones? We've mentioned Harewood Bellis. Is there any other ones that are on the radar that could potentially be coming in? Because I've seen Delap and another one as well. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but you would think that Vincent will be looking quite strongly over at Man City.
Yeah, I mean, not any names that I've heard, but other than sort of from reading various things online and sort of trying to look into them. But the way it was put to me, and it wasn't with any names, but it was that Howard Bellis isn't the only one who would be of interest, and it might be sort of dependent on Man City and who they decide. They might not have decided who they want to send out on loan yet. That could be part of the situation. They could be waiting on potential permanent moves for them, or potentially a Premier League club or a top flight team from abroad to come in. So it's one of those situations where we don't quite know, other than the fact that the company's been interested. And I think he's very much got a big say in these transfer situations, and the fact that he was a key factor in Daniel Ballard coming in, or looks like he's coming in, sort of shows how important it is that he's selling the vision as well as, and not just Burnley, and that clearly he's very much part of what the recruitments are trying to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Another club where company will have good links and good contacts booked, of course, Anderlecht. Josh Cullen, that's a name I've seen linked with a lot, but that again has seemed to have calmed down in the last week or so, and I don't think there was any official bids made, or there was never any reports of any official bids made. So, what's the latest on that one?
No, so I think my understanding there's been no contact. I don't think sort of between Burnley and Anderlecht. But company is a huge fan of the player. When I watched a load of Anderlecht games before I went on holiday, in preparation for company coming in and it being announced and stuff, as a tactics piece, Cullen was very much central to everything, really. I think he started every game, and probably played the full 19 most of them. I don't think he missed many minutes, and he was really crucial to the on ball system, and you drop it into sort of to make a bit of a back three and sort of dictating the tempo of the play. So he's clearly he's a player that the company really likes, and I think Cullen would be open to coming and joining as well. I think because he loved working under company, but it's whether Burnley firm up that interest, and there is, my understanding is his interest from elsewhere in Cullen from abroad. So it's one of those situations where would Burnley waiting for something, or will he eventually pull the trigger? But you would think that they would be looking to at least have looked at the possibility of signing a player the company rates so highly.
Yeah, I think that one just makes sense to me. Company rates him. The player wouldn't say no. It fits perfectly into this new system that company's going to bring in, which some of the players might take a while to get used to. So why not bring in a player that's used to playing in it? It just makes perfect sense to me, that one.
Yeah, and it might, there might be a number of reasons. You might feel that there's other players who could do that same job. They might feel they've got them in the building already. Josh Brownhill, Jack Cork, can they do that type of role? But yeah, no, it's an interesting one, and it was because it was one of those links where you think, oh, is that just typical because he's come from Anderlecht, so let's link him to an Anderlecht player. But I think it's become clear to me that they, company loves him basically and rates him really, really highly, and Cullen's game has come on leaps and bounds working under company, and he's a established international now, so. He respects company and the way he's done with them. So I think it's a bit of a wait and see, but there might be nothing that comes of it. But there's certainly an interest from Burnley's perspective in terms of how highly they rate the player.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, that's it from my point of view in terms of names. But obviously, this Daniel Ballard lad just came out of nowhere. Can we expect something like that happening tomorrow that you know about?
Well, it's not to my knowledge. I mean, that one was literally an hour ago anyway. So before that, I was, was just trying to continue to try and find things out. But yeah, no, it's one of those situations where these things. I think Burnley are very, very busy in the market at the moment, and they're probably working on a number of deals. And it's a case of, you know, when they might potentially get a breakthrough. And I think it's, you know, they'll be wanting to do things sort of under the radar, because these types of players, you know, like especially if there's interest from elsewhere, you know, that might, you know, bring up the price and a bit more start, and that's not, you know, no club wants to get into those situations. So, you know, I think that there's a hope that things, you know, this hopefully Ballard is the start of a domino effect, and it'll be interesting. I mean, Vincent Kompany is speaking to the press tomorrow afternoon, so it'd be interesting to get his insight, or his thoughts, his feelings of where the club are in terms of those situations, and how he feels recruitment's progressing. Because, you know, importantly, you want to make sure that he's given as much of what he wants and what he needs in these early stages of pre-season, so that when you get to the games, and, you know, as the training goes on, it probably becomes more tactical, and, you know, you start prepping for those first few games, because, you know, Burnley got a really difficult start by the looks of league positions last season. So it's not, you don't want to go into the season undercooked and end up, you know, having a poor start and then having to play catch up because your squad wasn't set, or you were still trying to implement all your things. And there'll probably be some, you know, some elements of that creep in, but you want to have as much of your squad as possible, you know, ready for that first game. And therefore, I think Burnley are working very hard behind the scenes to try and make that progress, which has been slower than expected. Because I think they would have wanted, you know, 2, 3, 4 in by this point. I think the hope is that will start to, you know, the ball will start to get rolling, and before long they'll have more to join Ballard if all goes well.
Yeah, I've seen some of the local lads saying that there's a press conference with Kompany tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So that's what I was alluding to there. So it's it'll give us a chance, our first chance to properly grill them, if you like. But certainly to ask those things about, you know, transfers, recruitment, all that type of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it, and how much of a straight bat he puts out, and will he go down the Sean Dyche route and say that nothing ever going to happen, that type of thing. But we'll see.
Yeah, but it's interesting to interview a new gaffer, though, isn't it? You not know how he's going to receive your questions. You don't know what he's going to be like. I bet that's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's all new to me because it's the first. Mike Jackson was obviously a managerial change, but it was still. Yeah. You know, an under-23s manager who knows the club and stuff like that, whereas Kompany's completely different. So it'll be really interesting. Hopefully, he doesn't doesn't respond badly to my questions, but we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. One last thing before I do let you go. Kits and friendlies. Obviously, a lot of people losing their mind over this. I'm a bit chill about it. The friendlies I would have liked to have seen announced by now. But I'm not overly concerned that they haven't been announced. Do you know anything? Obviously, I know it's not been announced by the club, so you won't be able to tell me. But do you know anything about any potential friendlies in the pipeline, or kit announcements? You know, is the away kit going to be yellow, blue, white? What is it?
I'd love to be able to tell you. But yeah, no, it's a little bit sort of we're sort of waiting on the club, and I mean, for me, it's sort of been 4 days of madness, to be honest, since I've come back. So it's one of the things I'm sort of trying to check out and see. But I would imagine that, you know, the club will be, you know, preparing to announce these types of things, you know, as soon as they can, especially with the friendlies, because given the small amount of time between now and the start of the season, you need to be getting these games in, but also, you know, you want, if, you know, fans can't attend, which you would expect, you know, they want to make their own arrangements and stuff. So you would like to think that the club are, you know, in the process and sort of close to announcing that. But, you know, hopefully that's the case. And it may be, you know, after Vincent's Kompany spoke tomorrow, that might be the case. You might be a bit more clear on those types of things. But, you know, me and the locals will keep asking the questions, and hopefully we'll have, you know, more and, you know, actual answers for fans as soon as we can.
Well, fingers crossed we get some answers in terms of friendlies and kit soon. But good luck with the Vincent Kompany press conference tomorrow. Hopefully, you can catch it all on The Athletic. Loads, all this amazing news that's going to come out. Hopefully, this new Ballard will be announced. Ballard, sorry, I keep getting his name wrong. Will be announced at the press conference as well. But thanks for coming on the show, mate. It's always a pleasure.
No worries, mate. Anytime.
And I'm sure we'll see you on the show again before the end of the summer.
Yeah, hopefully with plenty more new faces to talk about.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate.